all been waiting for after the awards, of course. And I have, I think, the most privileged role, but also the most daunting role here of introducing someone about whom so many wonderful things have already been said this evening. In particular, Dr. Giroux, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Raj, Dr. Elspeth Jones have talked profoundly about how Professor Noam Chomsky has influenced their lives, their learning, their careers, and 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 anything that I say about Professor Chomsky by way of introduction would not do justice to his legacy and his contributions as a linguist, an author, a public intellectual. And suffice it to say that he is regarded as one of the greatest thinkers, philosophers, and influencers of our time. And as Dr. Bista mentioned right at the top of this event, for all of the scholars present here today, Dr. Chomsky is widely regarded as the most cited scholar in modern history. He spent over 50 years at MIT and currently teaches at the Department of Linguistics at the University of Arizona. I also want to join Dr. Gowley and everybody else in wishing Professor Chomsky a very, very happy 92nd birthday. And with that, Professor Chomsky, I invite you to please address all of us.
How's that? Am I unmuted?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'd like to begin by thanking so many of the speakers and even commentators on the chat line for the very kind thoughts. And I would, of course, like to join in congratulations for the very impressive recipients of the Star Scholars Award. It's an enormous privilege to be able to participate in granting of these awards, highly merited awards. I would also like to express my thanks for being able to participate with such a distinguished group of eloquent speakers, to hear these highly informative, perceptive comments on matters of critical importance to all of us. And several themes were emphasized that I think require our serious concern and attention. One of them, of course, is internationalism, the theme of this entire meeting, the participating institutions. A second was solidarity, recognition that internationalism means participation, engagement with one another from all corners of the world. And I'd like to add a third term, complete the triad in a rather grim way. A third term that belongs along with internationalism and solidarity is unfortunately extinction. We cannot overlook the fact that we are in a unique moment of human history. Humans have been on Earth for a few 100,000 years, last instant of evolutionary time. It's the first time in the history of life on Earth, almost 4 billion years. For all we know, the first time in the universe that there have been creatures with thoughts, creatures who can ponder the kinds of questions we are discussing. It's an astonishing miracle, the result of many pure accidents over the billions of years of life. But here we are in this instant of evolutionary time, which could very well be the final moment for the existence of thought on Earth. we are facing serious prospects of virtual extinction of the species. There are several major crises. We are living in a confluence of them, something which has never happened before in history, will never happen again unless we provide the right answers for them. And the right answers will be through internationalism, solidarity, and education, which is sorely needed. We don't have much time. We do have answers to all the crises we face, but it's not enough to have the understanding necessary to grasp the opportunities. One of them, which is prominent in our minds very naturally, is the pandemic. It's, of course, global, knows no boundaries, will have to be solved internationally. We're facing very serious problems right now. Through international cooperation, vaccines may soon be available. One of the ones that's in the forefront was created by two Turkish immigrants to Germany, being marketed by international corporation. It's a symbol of what is happening. There's an international organization, COVAX, which is working on expediting international cooperation in development of the vaccine, and also on the critical problems of distribution, making sure that the vaccine will not be monopolized by those wealthy enough to appropriate it to themselves, but will be available to those who need it everywhere in the world. Regrettably, these noble aspirations are not being realized. The United States, as you know, has withdrawn from the conference, not participating. The United States and other wealthy countries are taking steps to gain control of the vaccine for themselves, not for those who need it. That must be overcome. That's a global problem, a problem of international solidarity, which should be foremost in our minds. The pandemic will end. We will emerge from this crisis at terrible cost and needless cost, as we can see from the experience of the countries, rich and poor, who have managed to deal with the crisis quite effectively. Others have not. They could. But sooner or later, we will emerge and enter a post-pandemic world. That post-pandemic world will be facing crises much more severe than the pandemic. The pandemic will be brought to an end. We will not be able to restore the Arctic ice packs that are melting before our eyes, opening the prospects for radical changes in the environment that will be highly destructive. Very recent studies have just been reported, scientific studies suggest that we may be approaching tipping points, points where these processes are irreversible. And we will be facing basically the termination of organized human life on Earth, facing catastrophes so enormous that we can barely imagine to contemplate their effects. There are others. We've lived for 75 years under the dark shadow of nuclear weapons. Those who have studied the grim record know that it's a virtual miracle that we've survived. not only from accidents, numerous accidents, but also occasional very reckless acts of leaders. Miracles don't go on forever. Some of the leading, most experienced specialists, conservative analysts, not given to exaggeration, like William Perry in the United States, former defense secretary, spent his life involved in nuclear weapons administration and control, warns that we are now, in his highly experienced view, facing a greater threat of nuclear war even than during the Cold War. And it's growing. The arms control regime, which offered some protection, has been dismantled by the US government in recent years. First, almost 20 years ago, the ABM Treaty under the second Bush administration, under President Trump, the INF Treaty, the Reagan-Gorbachev INF Treaty, more recently the Open Skies Treaty, which traces back to General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower in the 1950s. The last treaty, the New START Treaty, is renewal of it is imminent. Either it will take place within the next few weeks or that's terminated as well. And long, unconscionable delays. Won't talk about responsibility, but it's awesome. There's a third major crisis developing, namely the deterioration of democratic structures. It may seem a little strange to rank this alongside such awesome catastrophes as environmental destruction and terminal nuclear war, but it does belong there, not just my judgment, the expert judgment of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, leading American scientific journal. As I'm sure you all know, every year it sets the hands of a doomsday clock. Started in 1947, right after the two atom bombs, set then at 7 minutes to midnight. Midnight means termination. It's all over. The minute hand has oscillated over the years. 2 years ago, it reached the closest point that had ever been to midnight, 2 minutes. This last January, set every January, the analysts abandoned minutes, shifted to seconds, 100 seconds to midnight. The bulletin mentioned 3 major crises. One of them is the long-standing crisis of terminal nuclear war, now a threat that's increasing. The second is the growing threat of environmental catastrophe, very serious, short period ahead in which we have a chance to overcome it, move on to a much better world. If we don't do that, we will reach irreversible tipping points. The game is essentially over. The third crisis they mentioned is deterioration of democracy, which makes sense. The only hope for dealing with the major crises is an engaged, informed population dedicated to using the opportunities that do exist to deal with and these existential crises. Informed means educated. It means educated in not only the means that have to be applied, but the international solidarity that is necessary in order to implement these means. It means a society that is not only educated, but able to deliberate, to interact globally, in fact, to move towards solutions. Again, a problem of democracy on an international scale. And it is quite right to rank these three major issues as the crucial existential crisis that we face. Important to recognize that this generation, the generation of the young recipients of these awards, that generation has an awesome responsibility. It's the first generation in human history to face the question, will human civilization survive in any recognizable form? And it's also, again, the last generation that will face this crisis, because if they do not solve it, we're basically finished. Important to know that all of these crises have solutions. We know the answers to them. They're within reach, they're feasible, but it is not enough to have the knowledge. It is necessary to grasp and implement the opportunities. It's a tremendous responsibility, but an amazing challenge, exciting, amazing challenge. And we can only all hope with our firmest conviction that we will be up to mastering this confluence of problems which has created this unique, incredible moment of human history in which we are living and meeting. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you on this very exciting occasion.
Thank you, Professor Chomsky. Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the time at this late hour. I also heard from Uttam and others that you were coming directly from teaching a class. So it is you that we thank and are very grateful to. And I think your advice and observations are really critical about the three existential crises that we are facing, but that also the solution to all of the crises we are facing, including the pandemic this year, the solution to these problems is global through international collaborations, and is really a very strong argument for our field and what we do, where the idea of collaborating and international education is not just something that's feel good, but is really absolutely essential to solving the problems we are seeing today, and we will see in the future. So thank you very much for your remarks. And I'm going to now to close out this wonderful event, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chris Glass, who's the Associate Professor and Graduate Programs Director at Old Dominion University. He also serves as the Vice President of Research and Public Policy at the Star Scholars Network. And Dr. Glass is also the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of International Students. And Dr. Glass, I will turn it over to you for a more formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rajika, and thank you for those sobering words, Professor Chomsky, about these global crises. And I want to thank everyone who's joined us tonight at Shaping a Humane World, Global Perspectives on Higher Education, hosted by the Star Scholars Network. I would especially like to thank President Dr. Ghali and all of our distinguished guests who've joined us tonight. I also want to acknowledge 3 students who got up at 5:15 this morning in India, who have assisted with note-taking and technical responsibilities and keeping track of speakers. Tenzin Doma, Sendo Argawal, and Purna Sharma, thank you very much for your assistance in making this event so successful. I have a few few words to bring this wonderful event to a close. If you're like me, you're feeling connected, sobered, and inspired. You know, stars are both inspiring symbols, but also the substance of life. Stars are glimmers of hope that we see in the clear night sky. They help us navigate uncertainty across vast black oceans. Humans are infinitely diverse, but in some ways, we're all made of the same substance, stardust. We're all caught in an inescapable network, as Martin Luther King said, of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. In reflecting on the vastness of knowledge, Professor Chomsky once shared, you know, we all have little bits of understanding, glimpses, a little bit of light here and there, but there's a tremendous amount of darkness, which is a challenge. Each person who's joined us here today is connected to the Star Scholars Network. Each of us has a bit of understanding, a glimpse, a little bit of light. In a network, no one is at the top and no one is at the bottom. A network is a network because we are connected. Global connections are what bring us here. It's what we celebrate today with the Global Connections Awards. And it's what the Star Scholars Network is about in advancing upward academic mobility. Today, we leave connected, and tomorrow we continue our work that together we will shape a humane world. On behalf of the Star Scholars Network, I want to thank you for coming to this event. All of these events will be available via video recording on our social media channels, and we thank you very much for coming. And we thank all of our distinguished speakers for coming, and we thank Professor Noam Chomsky, and let's give him a final happy 92nd birthday. Thank you, Professor Chomsky, and we're glad we can celebrate this day with you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening, everyone. You may log off at your convenience or stick around, but thank you, Professor Chomsky, and thank you for everyone for coming on this wonderful day.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Professor Chomsky.
Happy
Professor
birthday,
Wright
Professor.
actually wanted to play a flute
Oh,
song of happy birthday.
Oh, play flute, sure.
Let's do that because that represents all of us again. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, everybody. See you in India next year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Siraj,
See
thank you so
all
much.
in
for
India next year.
offering. Yes.
Yeah. Hope
See you
so.
all.
That'll be wonderful.
Bye.
Wonderful,
Thank
wonderful
you.
evening, everyone.
See you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you, Uttam. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank
Rajika.
you, everyone.
Thank
It's
you.
amazing. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Guli.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Professor Wright.